Between 1950 and 2016, in Australia alone, 1,006 cases of child abuse are documented. All of this is within a single religious denomination, Jehovah's Witnesses. The above is contained in Case Study Report 29 of the Australian Royal Commission on the Institutional Response to Child Abuse. The document is public, so I'll leave the link in the description for anyone who wants to consult it. Hello. For those who don't know me, my name is Nogwachi, and I was an elder, a kind of pastor, for Jehovah's Witnesses. To illustrate in a simple way what the Australian Royal Commission report says, I invite you to pay attention to the following story. Ruth was always a playful girl who loved pets and playing volleyball with her friends. She lived with her mother in a small house on the outskirts of the city. Her mother wasn't very religious, but when she was 10, they both converted and were baptized as Jehovah's Witnesses. The problems began when she turned 15, and Creepston, a ministerial servant of Jehovah's Witnesses, began inviting her to lead Bible studies on Sundays after the meeting, and then invited her to his house to spend time with his wife and daughter, who was the same age as her. One Sunday they went to Creepston's house, but this time his wife and daughter didn't come out to greet her. Ruth thought they would surely arrive soon. Creepston bought her a drink and sat next to her on the sofa to continue talking. Ruth doesn't remember how, but things happened that day. When Creepston finished, she ran home. A tangle of anger, guilt, and disappointment filled her in the days that followed. She lost her appetite and couldn't concentrate at school. Her mother asked her questions, and Ruth only said her stomach hurt. Finally, after much insistence from her mother, she told her everything. Her mother immediately sought out an elder she trusted, and arrangements were made for him and another elder to speak with her and her daughter. They asked Ruth how things had happened, whether there were any witnesses, whether she had screamed, and so on. A few days passed, and the two elders spoke with them again. Creepston had denied everything. They told them that as elders they could do nothing because the Bible says in Deuteronomy 19:15 that there must be at least 2 witnesses for a testimony to be valid. They also reminded them that in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 1 through 8, the Apostle Paul strongly rebuked the Corinthians for taking their brothers to secular courts. The following Sunday, the Kingdom Hall meeting was a nightmare for Ruth. She heard Creepston comment in the Watchtower study that we must uphold Jehovah's righteous standards. She saw him singing and praying devoutly in the same physical space where she was. Back home, her mother, seeing Ruth's condition, made the decision. We're going to take Creepston to the authorities. Ruth and her mother changed congregations so as not to attend the same hall where that disgusting man was. A few weeks later, at the end of the meeting, 2 elders approached Ruth and her mother. They were told that they would both face a judicial committee, which could decide to expel them from Jehovah's Witnesses. What was the charge? Having violated the principle of 1 Corinthians 6:1-8 by suing Creepston before the secular authorities. Ruth's mother would never allow her daughter, having been Creepston's victim, to be victimized a second time, this time at the hands of the elders, who would subject her to an internal congregation judicial procedure. Ruth and her mother never set foot in a Kingdom Hall again, nor did they answer any elder's call. After a few months, they saw Creepston again, only to face him in a trial, which they ultimately won. Creepston would spend several years in prison. Although the characters in this story are fictional, they perfectly illustrate the conclusions reached by the Australian Royal Commission. Below, I list the conclusions, and please note how they relate to the previous story. 1. Practice of failure to report to authorities. The organization failed to report to police any of the 1,006 cases of suspected abusers identified since 1950, even in jurisdictions that required them to do so. 2. Application of the 2-witness rule. The policy of requiring 2 witnesses to validate an allegation of abuse was maintained, which demonstrated a lack of understanding about the nature of this type of abuse. 3. Inadequate internal processes. Internal disciplinary procedures were not focused on child protection or victim support, and were led exclusively by men, offering victims little or no choice over how their complaints were handled. 4. Insufficient sanctions. Internal sanctions were weak, allowing perpetrators to remain active within the organization and the community. 5. Lack of understanding of the risk of reoffending. When deciding on sanctions and preventative measures, the organization did not adequately consider the risk of abusers reoffending, demonstrating a lack of understanding of the nature and impact of this type of abuse. 6. Ostracism, that is, the practice of avoiding contact with former members. This practice discourages victims from reporting abuse for fear of being isolated from their community. The Royal Commission concluded that Jehovah's Witnesses failed to respond adequately to the allegations of abuse in question and failed to effectively protect children within their organization. Finally, it should be noted that the Royal Commission investigated not only the Jehovah's Witnesses, but also most religious groups in Australia, in most of which it also found widespread abuse and mismanagement. If you want to see more content like this, click the subscribe button on the left. And if you want to know whether Jehovah's Witnesses are a coercive sect from a psychological perspective, click the link on the right. See you soon.